It's the Mahatma Randy Show.
Oh, hello. I did not see you there. Welcome to episode 47 of the Mahatma Randy Show. Do you remember a show called Stargate Universe that was canceled about 10 years ago? No, of course you don't. Why should you? Nobody does, except me. I was thinking about it the other day, and I suddenly had this moment of catharsis and stopped staring at my hair. I get it cut like this on purpose, okay? Anyway, I had this moment of catharsis the other day where I suddenly realized with crystal clarity exactly where the show was going to go, what they were trying to do, and what it was ultimately all about. And I'm going to tell you about that now in voiceover narration because honestly nobody wants to stare at my ugly mug. I just figured out where Stargate Universe was going. The show was canceled 10 years ago. Its death was an open wound of dangling plot threads and unrealized potential and the endlessly droning question, what the hell was even the point of this? Most people would say that it had no point, but in fact, they are wrong. In fact, had it survived, this would have been the high water mark of the franchise, the one against which all future gates would have been judged. In the decade since it died, I have rewatched it many times. I get why people didn't like it. It was one hell of a tonal shift for the franchise, but it was actually the most ambitious show in the franchise as well. Even though everyone dismissed it as a Battlestar Galactica wannabe and a soap opera in space and, well, you know, all the nasty things that people say when they get pissed off at their favorite franchise. Personally, though, I think that the change was warranted. I absolutely loved SG-1, and while I didn't absolutely love Stargate Atlantis, you know, we did make out a few times, so it's not like there was no attraction there. I do get the appeal. But the hokey-jokey approach was wearing thin. The times were a-changin', tastes were changing, TV was changing, and the best way I can put it is to say that you can't have Roger Moore playing James Bond in a Jason Bourne world, you know? You gotta change with the times or get forgotten. That said, people really liked Roger Moore. Hell, I liked Roger Moore, but he did stay at the party too long, and, well, the Stargate franchise was going in that same direction. Anyway, about 20 minutes ago, as I'm writing this script on June 6th, 2021, I had this sudden lightning bolt to the head where I figured it all out, like everything. Like, I suddenly realized why Stargate Universe existed, what they were hoping to accomplish, why they were going about it the way they did, how it would have ended, and so forth. Boom! I got it. How did I get it? Well, either Philip K. Dick shot a pink beam of coherent light into my brain, or, more likely, my subconscious had just been cranking away on the problem for a decade now, and finally cracked it. I think the latter is more likely than the former. My brain works that way a lot. Trust me, it's tedious. So I ran the revelation past the people I had on hand that knew and liked the show, and their eyes went wide, and their pupils tightened to dots, and they said, "Oh my God, yes, yes, you're right. That not only makes sense, it is literally the only way that it could have worked out. Yes!" Obviously, then, it's a moral imperative for me to share it with you, my entirely theoretical viewers. Seriously, check out the number of views on this thing. I bet I never get more than 50. No one ever watches my crap. I had another episode lined up to go, but it was garbage, so I'm putting that on hold indefinitely, and I'm going to tell you everything that I just puzzled out. Ready? Cool. Now, if you're watching this, then you probably have already seen SGU, so I'm not going to bore you with a detailed recap. Likewise, I'm going to make it clear that I am not speculating about stuff that would have happened in the hypothetical Season 3, or whether or not Eli would have ended up with Chloe, or if TJ would have ended up with Young or Varro, or what the deal was with the catfish aliens. I honestly don't give a crap about that. This is strictly a big picture kind of revelation, as all the best ones are. So I'm just going to hit the important background stuff, okay? Okay. Once upon a time, about 13.8 billion years ago, the Big Bang happened, and the universe was created, colloquially speaking. This explosion caused a hell of a lot of noise, which is even still echoing around the universe. This is called the cosmic background radiation, and it was discovered in 1948. Anywhere in the sky you point a radio telescope, you will end up hearing it in the form of tiny background static. Seriously, it's real. Okay, so 13.79999999999 billion years passed without incident, and eventually the Milky Way galaxy was inhabited by a sentient alien species called the Ancients, who were conveniently and inexpensively exactly like modern humans in every way. Basically identical, even on a genetic level. because Stargate is a low-budget franchise, after all. These guys, the Ancients, were the ones that set up the Stargate network that allowed them to zip around anywhere and everywhere in the galaxy in no time. Whoop-de-doo, we all know that. Being an impossibly advanced civilization, they naturally knew all about the cosmic background radiation. And, say, about 6 million years ago, they noticed something odd in it. The CBR should just be random static, right? But they noticed a pattern in it, an organized pattern, one that couldn't be accidental. This indicated that there must have been some intelligence functioning in literally the very first nanoseconds that the universe existed. This is impossible, so naturally they wanted to find out what was going on. And by the way, 6 million years is a guess. I know they never gave specific numbers in the show. It's just a best guess based on what we know. Anyway, the Ancients built a huge fleet of seed ships that were sent out in a straight line to the edge of the universe. And yeah, I know. The universe has no edge, at least not like that. But it's a low-budget Vancouver-based science fiction TV show, so let's just roll with it, okay? They sent out these unmanned seed ships to plant stargates on planets as they passed along their route, presumably billions of them over time. Quite a while after the seed ships were on their way, perhaps as much as 2,000 years, the Ancients launched Destiny, a huge spaceship which was to have a crew and which was to follow the path laid out by the seed ships until it reached the edge of the universe and could figure out what the heck the mysterious signal was. Okay. You will probably have noticed a few flaws with this plan, ignoring the bad science. The most obvious question is, why use the Destiny at all? Why not just use the gates along the corridor to get to the edge of the universe? Or, why not just send out one seed ship with a super duper powerful gate on board to open up when they get to the edge of the universe? They've got one of those on Destiny itself, so we know that it's possible. And why was the Destiny expected to stop at various planets along the way to explore stuff? Clearly, that wouldn't have had any relevance to the cosmic background radiation, the signal, right? So what's the point of it? Well, actually, I think there is a point to it, but we will come back to that. The Destiny was launched without a crew, and at some point not long after that, the Ancients lost interest in it for some reason, and it was never manned. Why? I don't know. When asked, the showrunners gave a rather evasive, "They got interested in Ascension instead." And that's all the explanation we get. And that doesn't entirely make sense. But about 5 million years ago, some kind of plague hit the Milky Way galaxy and was wiping out all life here. The Ancients evacuated to the Pegasus Irregular Dwarf Galaxy about, 3 or 4 million light years from here. They seeded the Milky Way as they left, though, in hopes that life would re-evolve, which, of course, it did. The Ancients eventually got in a war with the Pegasus Galaxy, and were wiped out, except for a few thousand who escaped back to Earth about 10,000 years ago. A few of them interbred with us humans, and eventually they went extinct, though some ascended to a higher plane of existence. Again, it's hokey. Just roll with it. So then the course of the other Stargate shows happens, and at some point scientists from the United States Air Force get to screwing around with the Stargates. Gate addresses are 7 chevrons long, and an 8 chevron address allows you to dial another galaxy. But the gates have 9 chevrons, so what happens if you dial all 9 of them? Turns out you need a lot of power to do that, so they find a planet with a super crazy no-way sci-fi energy core, and they use that to power the project. Meanwhile, a group called the Lucian Alliance hears about it, and are very interested in dialing the 9th chevron because of a very old legend that whomever gets to the other side will gain something that will make them like the gods. Remember that. Like the gods. In October of 2009, the United States Air Force gets the gate working briefly, but the planet they're on gets attacked by the Lucians. The core goes critical, the planet's going to blow up, and 80 or so people end up jumping through the 9 chevron gate in desperation, ending up on the Destiny, which is derelict but still operational. They can't get back home, they're all trapped on the ship. Phew! That was honestly a lot more detailed than I had intended to go into. Sorry. It should be easier from here on out. Anyway, so the folks stuck on the Destiny have some various wacky adventures trying to survive, and I'm not going to tell you all about that stuff. The important part is that they were not expecting to find a ship. They really had no idea what was on the other end of the gate, though somehow the Lucians seemed to. And they're just scrambling to find stuff out that I just told you all about. The people on the Destiny were scrambling to. Anyway, over the last decade, I've asked a lot of fans what they think all of this meant and where they thought the show would have gone next and so on. I haven't found any of their theories terribly compelling or even really very likely. That's not intended as any kind of disrespect or slam on the fans. It's just that I'm a storyteller by trade, so I naturally tend to look at things in a different framework than most viewers. And for all I know, 100,000 people have come up with the same answer I just did, and I'm just not noticing it. I am not the most observant guy, so that is possible. And of course, it is entirely possible that I'm completely wrong about where the show is going to go. I have a long history of being wrong about these sorts of things. Anyone who needs proof can look up my old reviews of Lost and the RDM Galactica. Boy, was I off there. But most of the people I have talked to have viewed it as something like Gilligan's Island, where the goal is simply to get back home. They'll get rescued by the wormhole drive, or get enough power to gate back home, or thumb a ride with the Ascended, or whatever. To me, this seems to overlook what Dr. Rush repeatedly said over the course of the show. It's never been about going home, it's about getting where we're going. And in the unintentional series finale, Rush confesses to Eli that by skipping the rest of the drone galaxy, he's afraid they're going to miss something, some crucial piece of information that they need to make sense of what they find when they get to their destination. To heavily paraphrase him, the trip itself is as important as the destination. Otherwise, why would the ancients have set it up this way? And obviously, Rush is right about that. Rush is always right about that sort of thing. His character is a great big walking plot device reminding people to keep their eyes on the big picture. Rush is also jokingly associated with Satan a couple of times. That sounds like a blow-off gag, but remember, this show is all about the creation of the universe. It's Genesis, if you will. Obviously, the overarching story was about the mysterious signal from the instant of creation. People jokingly called this a message from God, but for obvious reasons, it couldn't have been that. Gods in Stargate are invariably false, the only exception being the God of the Bible, who never turns up in the show, but is always treated with a kind of nebulous, non-committal deference. That some gods are false doesn't mean God isn't real. That said, this was an uncomfortable area for the franchise, and they tended to leave it alone. Certainly, SGU wasn't going to find God. Any God. But, pretty obviously, SGU intended to challenge the concept more than it had in the past. I mean, it's right there in the title, right? Universe, and the ship is called Destiny. And if that isn't from God, which it clearly isn't, then who or what is it from? And that is what the show is all about. And I'll explain that after this message from our sponsor, me. This is my book, The Bones of an Angel, collection of science fiction short stories. There's a picture of me with a mohawk on the back. There's pages. And no pictures. I'm sorry about that. It is surprisingly free of typos, though. Anyway, here's a review by Bennett Dawson. 5 out of 5 stars, worth more than I paid. I've read a lot of books in my 55 years, and most of the authors of those books are dead. I am overjoyed to find that someone with such a high level of talent, someone who should have years and years of stories left to tell. I look forward to buying every book written by Randall Shawns, plus tossing a few bucks in his tip bucket now and then. Shawns' imagination and storytelling deserve a lot more than most successful authors make. Spread the word. Buy this book. You won't be disappointed. Thank you. There's links below. You can pick it up on Kindle for $1 or in Dead Tree format for more than $1. And we're back. Thank you for putting up with that. Okay, it occurred to me on my first rewatch years and years ago that the show had to be a time loop. Time loops are not uncommon in the Gativerse, and we even get one in SGU. There is a Greek tragedy element in play with these. A protagonist attempts to escape a prophecy, and his attempt is what causes him to fulfill the prophecy. Whereas if he'd just sat there and done nothing, he'd have been fine. We're told that the ancients simply lost interest in the signal. That does not make sense. That is misdirection from the showrunners. They figured it out, the ancients did. I think they probably figured it out before they launched the first seed ships. Definitely before they launched Destiny itself. And they didn't man the ship because they figured out the signal. The signal told them to launch the Destiny. Maybe not directly, but it had enough information in it that they could figure out what they needed to do. Destiny was unmanned because the ancients never intended to man it. I'll come back to that. Now, in addition to traveling to the edge of the physical universe, I have long believed that the ship was traveling back in time as well. I don't pretend to understand how that's possible. It could be a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of the real universe by the showrunners. You know how people point out that the stars you see in the sky might not even still be there? That the light left hundreds or millions or billions of years ago, and when you look through a telescope, you're actually looking back in time? Well, that's true, but it's also the sort of thing that's easy to misunderstand. So maybe they did. Or more likely, it has something to do with Destiny's unique FTL drive, which they make a point of telling us is different from any other kind we've ever seen before. The visual effects associated with it are very different too, lest we forget. The ship is enshrouded in a perpetual energy cloud of its own making. I believe that it is a time and space drive. I believe that by moving closer to the edge of the universe, the Destiny is also moving backwards in time, closer and closer to the Big Bang. When they eventually reach the edge of the universe in Season 6, or whenever, they would find themselves staring at the monoblock, the hypothetical primordial object that exploded, thereby creating the universe. Obviously, they would have figured this out at some point over the course of the series before they got there, but the edge of the universe is synonymous with the moment of creation in the context of the show. But wait, you ask. Wouldn't that mean that the ancient communication stones were capable of instantly communicating through time as well as space? Yep, it would. I don't see that as a real issue, since, as they point out in the show itself, they don't really understand how the stones operate, and the damn things act slightly different in SG-1 and SG-A. So, hey, communicating through time as well as space is honestly not much of a stretch. Now, the monoblock is thought to have exploded because it contained all of the mass and energy of the universe in a single point. The entire universe is shrapnel from that explosion, basically. But what if it didn't? What if it couldn't? What if it couldn't quite reach that threshold to explode? What if it was missing some mass? In real-world astrophysics, there's a thing called the missing mass problem. Essentially, the universe appears to weigh less than it should. Or, actually, a better way of putting it is to say that the universe weighs a bunch more than it should if the stuff we can actually see is all that there is. So where is this extra mass that we can't detect? Why is it missing? Where did it go? Most current theories about dark matter arose to try to explain this, though honestly none of them are anywhere near being proved, and we still aren't any closer to solving the problem than we were in the 1880s when Lord Kelvin first noticed that the numbers didn't quite add up. This problem is intrinsically tied to the creation of the universe, and hence the Big Bang. So the Destiny gets to the monoblock and they realize that they are the missing mass, and that it won't blow up if they don't kamikaze themselves into it. And if they don't do that, then the universe, and paradoxically they themselves, will never exist. Come on, guys. It's in the title of the show, Stargate Universe. The creation has to be connected to the fate of the Destiny and its crew in some way. One might even go so far as to say that it's their destiny to create the universe. So naturally they decide to crash into the monoblock, providing just that extra mojo that needs to kabloom, and 13.8 billion years later, here we are. Now, I have to point out that in the real world astrophysical missing mass problem, it has nothing to do with this. The real universe isn't actually missing mass. We know it's there, we just can't account for it. So adding a teeny bit to the monoblock doesn't make any scientific sense, but it is the kind of concept that is, again, easy to misunderstand. I am not by any means implying that the writers or showrunners of the Stargate franchise are stupid or ignorant or anything like that. Quite the contrary, I think they're pretty smart and very devoted to what they're doing, and produced a franchise that is consistently way the hell smarter, more insightful, more internally consistent, and just altogether better than Star Trek or Star Wars or Doctor Who. I love these guys and have nothing but praise for Robert C. Cooper, Joe Malozzi, and the mighty, mighty, mighty Brad Wright, without whom my life would be considerably poorer. At that same time, however, we are dealing with a franchise that has replicators built out of neutronium, hyper-advanced aliens that can't figure out projectile weapons, aliens with detailed genetic memories, sentient eels that can possess people, human evolution to a non-corporeal state, 4 major space wars overseen by the United States Air Force without anyone on Earth noticing, 0-point modules, teleportation, time travel, wormholes on demand that behave in no way like real wormholes, and about a zillion other ludicrous, impossible concepts like that. This is a low-budget TV action-adventure show, after all, not a science class. You grab these goofy concepts and you run with them, and so long as they're internally consistent, which is something Star Trek has never had any interest in doing whatsoever, then hey, no harm, no foul. The presence of any real science in science fiction is so vanishingly rare, And Gate never insults its audience. So honestly, if you've already accepted 99 impossible things before breakfast, what's one more? Right? Am I right? Spoilers, I am right. So the only lingering question here is, what was the signal that started all of this? Easy. The signal was Eli's documentary. I'll pause for a moment while you all go, whoa, at that for a minute. Pause ends here. So Eli's pointless documentary that we're watching, which is the show itself, was transmitted as the monoblock was exploding. The ancients discovered it. They were able to interpret it and recognize it as the biggest causality loop of all time. Literally and not figuratively, the biggest one of all time, because time wouldn't exist without it. So they realized the role they played in setting all this up, and they built the seed ships and sent them out because they saw that they had to. And they did it in the dopey Planet of the Week fashion they did because that's what they saw in the documentary. And they had to copy what they saw in the documentary or else the universe wouldn't have been created. So they sent the ship out empty in anticipation of the Air Force discovering it 6 million years later and then doing what they had to do. They had no choice. It was quite literally their destiny. The name of the ship is not an accidental choice. It and the name of the show are hiding in plain sight, letting us know what they're all about. And once you realize what you're looking for, there's plenty of clues all through the show. Eli's name means high or elevated in Hebrew, and in some contexts, when it's attached to a proper name, it can also mean my God. Biblical examples include Elijah, Elisha, Eleazar, Elizabeth, Elimelech, and others. There's also a high priest named Eli. And are there any other Dickensian names in the show? Probably. Colonel Young's first name is Emmett, which means strong and brave. Chloe's name means young and green and implies blooming. Both of those are obviously very indicative of their characters. Dr. Rush's first name is Nicholas, which means people of victory. But Nicholas is also one of the first 7 deacons chosen by the brand new Christian church in the New Testament book of Acts. As Rush had transformed over the course of the show from Eli's mentor to his admitted inferior and assistant by the end of the show, deacon seems oddly appropriate. As for Lieutenant Matthew Scott, his first name means gift from God in Hebrew. Matthew was, of course, one of Jesus' 12 disciples, and generally assumed to be the author of the Gospel of Matthew. And as for Camille Ray, well, Camille means attendant of the temple, which seems appropriate for her role in human resources, and Ray means dweller in the corner, which also seems appropriate in that she tended to kind of disappear for several episodes at a time. Colonel Telford's first name is David, which means beloved in Hebrew, which may or may not be a reference to him being Colonel Young's best friend, as well as a reference to King David in the Bible. Or it could just be a really common first name, and I'm reading way too much into it. His last name means iron worker, by the way. To my surprise, Vero is a real name and not just a made-up alien one. It's Latin, and it means durable and strong, which seems to pretty much describe him as well. Oh, and Ronald Greer means watchful, vigilant, wise ruler. I don't know if that actually means anything. He was pretty short-tempered, but he never seemed unwise. Or, once again, I'm just reading too much into it. Anyway, there are an awful lot of biblical names and names with religious connotations in this show, wouldn't you agree? That probably does mean something, given that Eli creates a universe best described by math, and him being Math Boy and all. And all of these characters have some sort of personal relationship with Eli. And since ultimately the show is about Eli, their relevance varies directly, proportionally to their relationship to him. So, is Eli God? No, I don't think so. I think that they would still leave a little bit of nebulosity around that. I think they'd leave it open for the option that some higher power, presumably the real God, had nudged this whole thing into motion without drawing attention to it. There might be some element of the show's subtext about learning to distinguish between the sacred and the mundane, a subject the franchise has always been interestingly interested in, without really obsessing over. I doubt they would have drawn a conclusion, but I do think that they would have left a little wiggle room to allow for more things in heaven and earth than are dreamed of in most sci-fi shows' philosophies, particularly dumbass shows like Star Trek. God, how I hate Star Trek. So much pretension and so little substance. But ultimately, the show is about the feedback loop between destiny and circumstance, I think. How the universe creates us and how we create our own destiny in the universe. I mean, it's all foreshadowed in the 40 episodes we got. Hell, it's in the title. He who has eyes, let him see. And that's it. That's what I got. So please sound off in the comments below and let me know if you think that I got it right or if I'm way off or whatever. And please like and share please like and share and subscribe. And if you have any friends that like Stargate or Stargate Universe, please make sure that they see this so that we can discuss whether or not I'm full of crap. And that's basically all I've got, so go the hell away. Stop staring at my hair. Oh God, no!